for everyone. Thank you to everyone joining in. We'll give it a couple of minutes before we actually start the webinar to let people come in. For all of those that have already joined, feel free to ask questions along the line of the webinar. We will try to sum up in the end or answer questions on an ongoing basis when relevant. As I said, we will wait a couple of minutes to let everyone join in. So we'll give it another minute. Thank you to everyone just joining in, and sorry for those who already heard this, but we are just letting people come in. Are you ready, Philip and Toge?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We're just annoyed about the Slack channel that is going on the computer, and I cannot turn the sound off. That's something that I just need to be mindful of.
I guess we will start the webinar officially now. I'm Jonas from Umbraco, work as a tech partner manager here, and I have the pleasure of being the moderator today. And today we'll be talking about composability and sustainability and how those two combine. And we have the pleasure of having Philip and Toge from Philip, our CTO here at Umbraco, and Toge, the CEO of our great and powerful tech partner Enterspeed here, to talk about these topics. The format of today is a little bit different from the webinar that you might be used to. This is an open format discussion where Philip and Toge will share some of their perspectives on these topics, and we would love for you to pitch in with questions, ask in the Q&A or ask in the chat, and I'll make sure that we put Philip and Toge on the spot with some nice questions that you have out there. And I think that's a pretty good segue to actually having a little bit of an introduction from you two, Philip and Toge. For everyone attending, could you perhaps start out, Toge, by introducing yourself, your experience, and also some of the justification for having an opinion and perspective on the topics that we'll discuss today?
Oh, that's a biggie. So first of all, hi, my name is Toge. I'm the CEO of Enterspeed. We have been working as a company for 3.5 years now, or almost. We are a middle layer between the front end and some awesome backend tools like Umbraco, but we will probably come back to that later on. The reason why we started Enterspeed 3 years ago was that I was working with large e-commerce sites, both nationally and internationally. And I was heading up 3 of the 10 largest e-commerce sites back in 2015 to 18 in something called Selling Group. We were having a big, large monolith that was called SAP Hybris. That was before SAP realized that Hybris is something you commit, and then Nemesis comes and kicks your ass afterwards. But we were stuck on that monolith, and we started to do a separation of concerns piece by piece. We failed a lot, we learned a lot, and that's why I'm standing here today, is that I have more than 8 years of experience of failing, trying to do composability, and also looking a little bit about sustainability, and hopefully we're also starting to do some successes. And that's a little bit about the way we think and share our learnings around what did I fail with. I'm coming from a non-technical background. I'm actually born in the finance world, which is quite odd to stand here as a partly tech guy, but I have been management consulting and been heading up strategy in the Lego Group. So I'm coming from a strategic financial point of view, working into the space of composability.
And you, Philip?
Yes. Well, other than obviously the navy blue shirt as
Yes.
as qualifying me to be here, yeah, I'm the CTO of Umbraco. So at the end of the day, I'm responsible for all of our products and all the stuff that we do. I actually have a background as a developer, and I used to write a lot of code, and stuff. It's a few years ago now, so don't quiz me on code. But that understanding of how the web actually works and what makes everything spin, I think is super critical to understanding sustainability in that perspective. And of course, it's a big, it's close to my heart. It's leaving the earth better than we found it, and
it should be close to all of our hearts.
It should be.
Yeah.
It should be. I mean, the one qualifier maybe that not everybody knows. 4 or 5 years ago, I was accepted into Google's expert program as an expert developer. So in the front end scene, so I actually have some expertise in building front ends that perform really well. And of course, there was a big spillover between performance and sustainability, or at least getting your emissions down.
Yeah.
Thank you both. I guess it gives a pretty good understanding of why you have something to share. But I guess a good point to start out would be to get some of the things that we're going to discuss here defined a little bit. So let's start with the concept of composability. And could you perhaps give your perspectives on what is composability and composable architecture?
I think that's you.
Is that me? Oh, lucky me. Okay, good. So composability, and it's actually a funny word because composing is something you do in music almost, but basically it means that you are orchestrating a lot of different components. So you have a component for content management, you have a component for PIM and for commerce. Then the ideal world of composability is that it's easy to take one element out and shift it over to another element. And that's where we need to put headless into the play as well, because you need to present the data and do a presentation layer on top. So composability is how you actually orchestrate and make an architecture where it's easy to take out some components and changing with other components to do what is called best of breed, but actually making all the different components in the best working way that is giving a support to the business strategy. Sounds fancy, but basically it's all about playing Lego. Lots of bricks building the figure that you would like to have as a business. The reason why we focus quite a lot on this area is that we believe, then you need to look at it from an architectural point of view, but we believe that there is a 3-layered approach, meaning that you have all the different components in the lower end of the landscape. Then you have a middle layer that actually orchestrate all the different components, so they don't have to be integrated back and forth and cross over and so on. And that middle layer serves the front end, so we can build an efficient, fast, and high-performing front end. So that's where we play into the composable world, but that's also what we mean when we talk about composability, that simplify the amount of integrations and making it as much as like playing with Lego bricks as possible. Make sense?
I think so.
You agree?
Yeah, I think I agree. I mean,
good start.
A key element to this is, of course, headless, and then that is a trend we've been seeing for many years now. That all the systems interact with each other, and everything is data, and it's not so much about sending views over the wire.
Yeah, agree. And it's actually quite funny to think in that way, because when you see the evolution of content, it all started with agencies building their own CMS systems like 20 years ago, and then they started to realize, oh, there's a product, let's call it a content management system, and then a few one like yours went really, really good. And then the next level was, oh, we want to have it headless. Oh, so everybody built their own headless layer on top, and then you're starting to really excel in this. So, okay, what should they do then? Then, we do all the orchestration, and hopefully that's where we kick in and say the content federation of this world is something that could be managed with a product. So I think that's the huge overlap between what Philip and Umbraco does and what we do in Enterspeed.
You've already touched upon it a little bit, Toge, but why is composability important for businesses out there, or for developers out there, to have a good grasp of, and why does it make sense for them to consider it?
So basically, it's about utilizing the tools that you have. So if you're working in a composable way, there is a lot more coordination between the systems. You need to handle that. That's the complexity part. But you can also have a product and a tool specified for your exact needs, meaning that you can actually buy a best of breed element, put it down and say, I need this to build I need to have a really good editor experience because I have a lot of editors and they are overlapping with what they do. Then they need a really, really good content management system and they need to find that. But other companies, they need to have a really good PIM system because they need to work with their PIM and that needs to be sold right. But then there is the need for working with best of breed components will increase over time, because what we see and what we have seen the past 5 years is that companies, particularly enterprises, they buy more and more tools. So then it's about orchestrating all those tools because they are already started. But the key here is that whether you are going to have it in a way where you can change them, that's the composability, or you're just making another big monolith on top. And if you create that monolith on top, that's what I realized back in the Dansk Supermarket or Selling Group now, that was then you just have a monster that you are trying to feed on a daily basis. That's where the nemesis comes and kicks your ass, because you spend more time testing, you spend more time figuring out, how can I solve a really, really small part of the puzzle, where in composability, you can work in several streams, you can work with many different challenges at the same time, which I find really, really cool. So for large companies, it makes a lot of sense. But they need to handle the complexity of orchestrating all the different systems.
To me, one of the biggest advantages of the composable architecture is that it doesn't tie you into one life cycle for all of the products.
Yes.
Because the problem is typically that you have an ERP and the life cycle of an ERP is 15 years or whatever, and then you have a life cycle of your front end of your website and it's 10 months.
Yeah.
And not having to rebuild everything every time any of the pieces change. I think that's a huge differentiator.
Yeah, and let's be honest, there's a lot of legacy out there, and you need to deal with, how do you deal with legacy?
Yes.
And the less responsibilities you tie into the legacy, the more flexibility and digital agility you get, the better for the company.
Yeah. I like back in my architectural days, talking about the legacy in a box approach, where when you migrate from legacy to a more modern approach, you start by isolating the legacy in a box and interfacing with it as even though it probably is 5 different domains, you interface with it through one legacy in a box component, so you can swap that out one at a time, right?
Yes, then you just have don't do what I failed miserable with. We just moved the poo.
Yes.
As I said, we took the legacy from an old platform, put into a new platform, and then we were.
Yeah, please don't do that.
That's a bad advice. Yeah.
Great explanations. I guess one of the things that would be relevant, at least for me also to know, is to get your perspectives on maybe some of the challenges as well with composability, because I think it's evident with your explanations that there are benefits to reap from having this understanding and going about your architecture in a composable way. But what are some of the challenges from your perspective?
Will you start?
I mean,
where to start?
the glue that needs to tie everything together is a challenge that you need to be very careful with when you orchestrate, or like when you build that glue, or whenever if you use a product for it, or if you can configure it somehow, or if you can code it or whatever. That's the biggest risk, because I mean, you end up in one end, you end up just building a new monolith that's the glue layer, and you're just as stuck to the same vendor and the same everything as you were in the traditional way, or you try to generalize everything so much so that everything is abstracted so far away that it becomes impossible to build on. So finding that that right abstraction level, I think that's probably that is one of the hardest things I see in that architecture.
Yeah, and try to be slightly more specific on that challenge, because that's the one that I'm struggling with in my daily sales cycles. That is custom code.
Yeah.
So there is so many companies out there that said, oh, we have bought a headless CMS, but that headless CMS, oh, we are so special. So they have done something custom on it, but then you lose all the benefits from the composability, because if one element is custom and it's heavily depending on another element and how you tie things together, then you're stuck on the glue, as you say. So to me, it's all about understanding the custom element. Where should I be custom? Is there a good way of creating that customization that you probably need, but you need to be very aware of how you're doing it. And that's where some of the elements that we have been working on is that send raw data from a source system and then model or transform the data in a standard way, so you can actually use it in the other end, but it will also simplify the way that you're working in your composable stack. So I totally agree. The problem is often the coordination and the glue that you put between the systems that ends up creating another monolith on top, and I'm not sure that everybody is aware of how big of a mess that is as well.
Yeah. I mean, the important part is, I mean, of course, the end users usage of whatever experience you're building and the business goals, that's what you need.
Yes.
And all the other stuff is, at the end of the day, that's just implementation details, right?
Yes.
So we need to make sure that we don't compromise on the user experience for the end user for some architecture reason or for some system reason or anything. Like, we really don't want to go back to the 2010s where everything was bootstrap and every website looked the same.
Yes.
Like, we want to build custom experiences that convert, that does all the business goals that we need. And we don't want our tools to get in the way of that.
No, but we don't want to screw up our tools.
Yeah, exactly.
So we are spending approximately 2 million figures DKK on something where you only get a security patch.
Yes.
That's the
really
other end of the scale.
Yes.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you think is meaningful for our participants to get from you in relation to composability? Something that you feel is important before we move on to sustainability and start having that discussion?
To me, the most important thing is the thing about how to minimize the amount of customization that you actually are making when you're starting to go composable. You can easily make some old sources and some new sources work together if you find the right ways to do it. You don't have to change and start greenfield from the scratch, because that's often a very expensive, really expensive way of doing things. But you can actually do it in a transition if it's done right.
Yeah.
So that thing about thinking composability, that's a journey. More than it's, oh, I need to build composable, so we need to start from scratch over here. That's to me also important to mention that it's a transition, and maybe it's about starting to make sure that you can call your old ERP system without calling the ERP system. So having a layer in between that actually delivers the data to the front end, so they don't have to ask the backend system. In that way, we have started the decoupling and the performance, which you also would like in composability. So to me, it's about understanding that composability is a journey. Start by one source at the time, and then you will figure out how to do it. But making the big bangs, they will surprise you negatively. So to me, it's more about starting a journey where you separate the front end as a starting point, and then separate out into systems that make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess a major part of composability is also the ability to be able to innovate on an ongoing basis and treat different business problems individually with the systems, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then having a dialogue on business on, are you really that special?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
True.
Be special when you need to,
Yes.
but you probably don't need to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
we promised in this webinar that we would combine composability and sustainability. So I think we all know that sustainability is immensely important, and there's a lot of facets to that. But could you perhaps start with sharing your perspective on that, both Philip and Toge? And I guess Philip, you can start the discussion here.
Sure. I mean, sustainability on the web is, I mean, of course, related. There's a lot of servers out there running that powers what we know as the internet today, right? And that's basically what we're talking about. Then there's a lot of optimizations we can talk about, like on the actual device that uses the service. And I mean, for a lot of people, that might be a good place to start, because again, it's relatively easy to start there. You can do a pretty significant change. And I think today what we're seeing is that between 50 and 60% of the actual, carbon emissions that come from visiting a website is actually from the device that actually uses it. So there's a significant thing to be done there. But in terms of what we're talking about today, I think it makes more sense to look a little bit more on the traffic and on the servers and all the setups around here. And I mean, at the end of the day, fewer servers running more efficiently is better, because that's less power, that's less carbon needed. So that's where the trends kind of oppose, you should think. But I don't think they necessarily do, because what you're saying about don't connect directly to the ERP, probably the ERP is not very efficient at doing requests. So by having some kind of middle layer in between, you're probably saving emissions instead of making more, even though you're technically running one more server, right?
Yes.
So there is a lot of overlap, and there's a lot of things where it's not necessarily how you would first think.
No. I totally agree. I think taking sustainability into the digital world, it makes a lot of sense, because basically it's all about sending fewer high pictures. That's just what's going to take too much space, too many megabytes. It's about not having idle capacity, just standing and running and waiting for Black Friday 360 days a year. It's about making sure that you're only sending the specific need of data, not all the other things that you can send as well. So it makes a lot of sense. It's like looking at your garbage back home and say, oh, this is plastic, it needs to go over here. But and it's the same way. You can do some amazing numbers that I'm still very scared about. But the amount of energy that is used by actually making a web page is something that is important. And what can we do? We can optimize the pictures. We can send less megabytes. We can send less data. But we can also make sure that it's hosted on something that is extremely green. We can make sure that we are making as efficient requests as possible, making sure that the sources that you are requesting is as efficient as possible. Yeah. And in this way, I think it makes a lot of sense also from a composability point of view, is to look at each individual component and say, do I need you to scale to a Black Friday, or is it only an editor experience? Then just scale it for editor experience. There are so many things that we can do and we should do. I think that's the key to my approach to sustainability, is there's so many things we should do here, regardless of how many percentage of the total energy that is actually doing, but we should just be better.
Yeah, and I mean, just to be clear, when we're talking about sustainability in this perspective, we're only touching on the part that actually comes down to electricity turning into carbon. There's a million other things that we could also talk about.
So many things
today, we will just talk about that part, because that's what we know the most about it.
Otherwise, we will do 24 hours of madness of two guys, not very diverse, standing in a room in Aarhus. Yeah.
Fantastic.
But I think there's a lot. I mean, you mentioned green suppliers of your cloud, and I think. I'm very happy to see that most of the cloud vendors today are what they call green, meaning they're net neutral, right?
Yeah.
So they try to use green energy when they can, but then when there's no sun and when there's no wind, they still, turn up a big diesel engine to make electricity, and then they plant some trees somewhere. And that's, I mean, it's better than not planting the trees, obviously. Yeah, but at the end of the day, it's still electricity, it's still emissions that we could cut. And that we should try to minimize as much as possible. So just to be clear that using a green cloud is not an excuse to do anything and to just be able to say, I've done my share.
No. And I think one of the things that I enjoyed was the last code garden that you did, where there's so many things we actually can do.
Yeah.
And I think that those are some of the elements that could be fun to actually look into for all of us that is building either commerce sites or normal websites or content sites.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, one of the things I've thought about, one of the things that made me think was when I realized how much of what we do in our architecture actually comes down to habit and has no good reason for it. Like it just lies in the head of everybody who's a developer that if you have something that you need to process, you do it like that. You can process out of when there's not time.
Yeah,
you do it in the middle of the night. That's just how we're always taught. You do it at 2 a.m. because there's no users there. But probably it runs out of process anyway, so it doesn't really make any difference whether there are users or not. But more often than not, the sun is not shining at night.
Yeah.
There's less wind at night, so there's less green energy at night. So if you're looking at it from a sustainability perspective, it probably makes more sense to do it at 2 p.m. To do it in the afternoon instead. If it's not time sensitive. I think that was changing the perspective of why we do things. I think that's why we do things.
Yeah, and that also goes back to a little bit about composability, is that you need to change the perspective of the ways you are used to work.
Yeah.
And you need to do something different one way or the other, and then you can easily think sustainability into it and say, this one needs to be, do I really need a redundancy set up on this one? Because I'm just storing data to two places. That's a place to look for instance. Yeah. Or is the query that I'm doing, is that querying on a large ERP system that is not that is standing on iron in the basement and not in the cloud? And I think I've read one day, I'm not sure if you have the right numbers, but a cloud server is 95% more carbon efficient than something standing in the basement, which is also crazy.
Yes.
So that's a huge benefit for going cloud and understanding that ways of working.
Yeah.
And it's so little that we should just do. We just need to do it.
Yes.
Really cool, really great perspectives. So you've already touched upon it a little bit, combining these two important concepts. But I guess a question that I would have is how can both Planet and businesses out there profit from combining a composable or composability approach and thinking about sustainability while doing that?
I think most often, I mean, other than the fact that it's good to do. It's something that you should do for your kids or for whatever for the rest of the world. I think also because sustainability efforts also very often make your experience faster. It's also good for all your business goals. I mean, look at all the research on how much better conversion you have if your website is half a second faster, and you've got your business case right there.
Yeah. Don't get me started on that one.
Exactly. Like there's a huge amount of data on that. And of course, the other side of it is that in most of the cloud offerings today, you pay for the actual compute time that you use. So if you can cut down your compute, it generates less electricity, but it also probably gives you a smaller bill.
Yes.
So there's a lot of business reasons to do it if you don't want to do it for the good of the world.
Yeah, man, and there's so many things. So one of the things that is also interesting is that when you buy a new service for anything, and then you say, "Do I need a redundancy setup?" Then you're just with a check mark. You're actually doubling the amount of data that you're saving.
Yes.
And often maybe you're saving it in a different place anyway. Do you really need that redundancy setup?
Yeah.
Or
does it need to be on all the time? Maybe it could just be a backup that runs every night.
Yes.
So you have the data. And the same comes down to, your development environments and staging environments, probably your developers only work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Why do they need to run 24/7? There's a lot of extra machines just churning away with doing absolutely nothing.
Running serverless setup is a huge way of saving a lot of money. I totally agree. But also on the digital experience, I would argue any day of the week, do you really need all the pictures? Do you really need all the banners of this world? Do you need all the different
auto-playing videos?
Auto-playing videos, all the different services that you're adding onto your site with bling bling all over. There's a lot of things that's actually just sending megabytes around. And I know the research that I quoted earlier this year was slightly wrong, so I was terribly corrected. But there's still something in it to say that you need to just make sure that you're sending less data around. It makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Back in the days, back in 2005, the sites were way smaller because the internet was way slower. Yeah. But with faster internet, with faster 5G, 4G, whatever, the amount of data that we're sending around is just increasing. The
average website for mobile is 10 times as big. Say six times as big as 10 years ago. 6 times as much data.
Excellent.
That is insane.
Yeah.
And we did, as you said, like 10 years ago, we built really efficient websites because the phones were crappy and the internet connections were crappy. Yeah. And then as that became better, then we became crappy developers. Yeah. And we just created, experiences that are not good. Yeah. So we should really do this. This makes the user experience better, and of course it saves a lot of data from being shipped around.
Yeah, and I'm much into this way of thinking and saying, is it really necessary? Yes. But what we have learned, so I've been in the business of e-commerce for a long time, and we all learned the better quality of the pictures, the more conversion. But we have already learned this: the more, the better. The more pictures, the better. The more videos, the better. We have learned that a lot more is just better. But I would like to see some of the studies that is turning it around and say we're actually having a much better conversion with just less. Yes. I like the old quote because it was standing on the door of the CEO of the Lego Group, who actually said, perfection is not achieved when there's nothing more to add, but when there's nothing left to take away. And I think we in the digital world should actually consider that quite a bit. That's also, and it all comes down to Enterspeed, I have to say. But that's also why it's really simple for us to map data down. So you're only serving exactly what you need. You're not pushing too many products, too many variants, too much data for an exact need, but you're only serving what is exactly needed. That's part of what we think could help out in the other end of sustainability. Because it all comes down to how many megabytes are you sending.
I think that's a really good point, Toge. I just want to say before we, you made it. I just want to say that if any of you attendees out there have a question, feel free to ask Philip and Toge. I guess everything is allowed here except for maybe if Toge is wearing Enterspeedos. But
thank you for that. That's why we ended the table in this size. Agree.
Yeah.
We cannot see the chat though, so if there's anyone writing something on the chat, then you need to say it to us.
I will make sure to liaise. So please feel free to chip in if there's anything that you would like Philip and Toge to touch upon.
Then I'll tell a story in the meantime.
Yes. Good one.
About auto-playing video, because it is one of my pet peeves. I hate videos that autoplay. And I mean, from a user experience perspective, I think it's bad. But from a sustainability standpoint, it is ridiculous. Yes. So I actually did the math and tried to figure out like how much carbon is that emitting that we don't really need. So imagine that you have just a 20-second video. It should be small. It should be easy. Everything should be good. And if you have it auto playing for everybody, it is 7 megabytes of video. That's a YouTube standard embed with the embed functionality and the video all the way loaded. if we then say, instead of that, let's make it not autoplay, and still 1 in 10 actually clicks the video and watches it, and actually pays a little bit extra for not autoplaying. The amount of CO2 you can save on that is pretty significant. So I did the math. I'm not gonna put all the details here. You can have it if you want to. But the point is, so I did this for a talk I did in Stockholm. So I'll try to figure out how many visitors to your website do you need to have in order to save the CO2 that it costs me to fly from Copenhagen to Stockholm. And it turns out it's about 40,000 visitors. That's not really a lot of. That's not a lot of visitors. I mean, a lot of people don't have 40,000 visitors every day, but maybe you have 40,000 a month or 40,000.
You don't have at Umbraco. We have every day.
Of course you can. But I mean, 40,000 is still something that most people would be able to see. This is actually, reachable. And just by turning off autoplaying video, which probably a lot of users will enjoy, you can save the equivalent of a flight. I think that's insane.
Yeah.
And that, trying to quantify those numbers sometimes actually make you think about what a difference you can make, right?
I did some research back in January, where if you go to a news site in Denmark, you get 10 megabytes today. And if you then I visit one of the corporate sites that had an autoplay video, then I got around 160 megabytes. Thank you for something that I haven't asked for and didn't want. Yeah. And there's so many things, so many small elements. And so to me, sustainability always go down to the same point, is that if you have considered what you're doing, you would never do it.
Yes.
Because you would never send something as inefficient as 7 megabytes to a client that you haven't met yet and haven't asked for it.
Yeah. And I think it also comes down to what we talked about, like 10 years ago, we were building better websites. We would never do this 10 years ago also, because not only would it be super slow, but people were paying for megabytes.
Yeah.
Today everybody has, gigabytes in their phone subscription, and it doesn't really matter, right?
Yeah.
But if you have customers in other places than, Western Europe or the US, they still pay for their data. Yeah. And if you send them a 7 megabyte video, it's like money out of their pocket. If I was the user of that end, I would never come back to your website.
No, exactly. That's one element. The other element, that it slowed down speed.
Yes.
So what is I think the last statistic I saw was that in Europe and in China as well. Even China is slightly worse actually. But if your mobile site loads slower than 3 seconds, half of your traffic is gone.
Yeah.
So it's also about, if you solve the amount of megabyte you're sending, the faster the site goes. The faster the site goes, the more will stay. The longer they stay, the better business. It's up. I think it was up to 10% or something increase that Zalando released, that if they could just go 1 second faster, up to 10%. So then sustainability comes in and becomes big business.
Yeah, the great thing is that in most scenarios, these things align just beautifully, right?
Yes.
Like you can, make a better world, make a better business, and save some money. What's not to like?
Yes, I agree.
Yeah,
and I think
I think there's a good point here that I want to share with you, because it's very relevant with what you're discussing here. Simon says, not a question, but it's also a matter of communicating effectively. 25 pictures and 2 autoplaying videos isn't clear communication. Putting on the sustainability hat can also put the spotlight on what's really important to tell the user. I think that's a really spot on comment.
Yeah, I totally agree.
We also have another question in relation to composability. Are there any companies that should not go for a composable setup, or do you think this is the direction for every company out there?
It depends on your needs. Don't build a rocket if you don't need a rocket. If all you need is a website that has nothing on it, don't put a million layers in front of it. Don't do anything, just build a website. But probably more often than not, we'll see businesses going into needing more systems, needing, products stored somewhere, media stored somewhere, customer data going somewhere else, like leads going to, this and there, and all over the place. So, as we like to say in Umbraco, content used to be enough, but today it's very rarely the case that you can only do content and build it. So I think in a lot of in most scenarios, it makes sense to think about composability.
Yeah, I tend to agree, but I also so from my past experience, there is a size where it starts to become more relevant. If you're a small company and you can stick on a very standard platform, and you can say, okay, it's not ideal, but I stick to that platform. Then you should stick to that platform. I won't say the S word in here, but it could be Shopify. But you could just stick with that, because that's all you need to get your business started, get it going. But at some point, you are sick and tired of working with spreadsheets, and you're sick and tired of some of your processes and so on, and you want a different tool. Then it might come to a point where you say, now we have so many editors or so many processes that I would like to change, where composability starts to become the relevant. So to me, it's like the small companies, they shouldn't consider it as a start. But when they start to become mid-tier, or particularly upper mid-tier, and if they are complex B2B, they should probably consider it slightly before. But the enterprises and upper mid-tier to enterprises, they should be considering what they're doing in that space, because they already have more than one system. Maybe they have a CEO that would like to buy another company, and then they have multiples of everything. And that's where composability also can play a role in a consolidating market.
Actually, a related question. So what you just said is that, or mentioned that going composable is a journey, but where do you actually start? With a CMS, a PIM, a DAM, or ERP? Or where would you two suggest you start on a composable journey?
Well, I think not to let Toge jump in and put his own product in front. I actually think that adding some kind of layer in front of your monolith is the first step. That's what I was trying to say with the legacy in a box thing. You know, consider all the stuff that you have one big component, and build the thing that you need to be the orchestrator as the first thing. Yes. May that be Enterspeed or any of the competitors, that's fine. But put that in first, and then you make that connection so that all the front-end websites communicate with that layer. And then you can start, tearing things apart behind and changing one component at a time, ripping out your PIM out of your monolith and replacing with a standalone PIM, and then connecting that to the same thing, doing the same thing for all of the other components eventually. So that's typically the journey I advise people for.
I totally agree, and we actually have a client that we send on that journey. They had a large monolith, sending all the data from the monolith, building a new front end, because that's where the business starts. It's with a good digital experience. And you can build a new, more agile front end. You can start to say, oh, I have my CMS and my PIM heavily tied together, then untie them. That's a step number 2. But don't start with that before you have know exactly what journey you want to drive your digital experience in. And that's what I mean by a transition, is that you cannot just untie a PIM and CMS if they have been growing together for 10 years. It takes time to do that. So it's more about what can you do on a very short term to get it started. And often the great business result starts with the front end and the digital experience. And by the way, then marketing is happy, and the Google crawling bots are happy. And then you can, behind the scenes, start to work it better out.
Yeah, it is all about the user experience, and the rest is internal implementation details, and we should absolutely care about that. That's not my point. But my point is saying you need to start with the user, and you need to start with the experience that you want to build for your user.
We're actually nearing the end of the webinar. So so time flies in good company. One of the things that I would like you to do before we end the webinar is to maybe summarize your main points in relation to the combination of composability and sustainability in a easy to digest way, if you may. And I know that's very difficult.
You're the easy to digest guy.
I thought you were the moderator that was the one supposed to say, today I learned. No?
Oh yeah, sorry.
Okay. So should I try?
Give it a go.
I give it a go. I would say composability and sustainability contain some of the same challenges that we need to understand. We need to be very mindful of what we're doing. In the sustainability world, it's about we need to be mindful of, do we really need all the servers running? Do we really need to send all this data? Do we really need to send a lot of megabytes around? In the same way, in the composable world, are we really that special? Do I really need to build a custom element that ties things together? Do I need to build a lot of glue? So asking the same questions where we are actually saying, is this something that is common sense? Because if you look at it from the outside, also from an architecture point of view and so on, composability is common sense. You want to use tools that is specific for your business that I want to work with. Yes. But it's not common sense to glue them together in a special way where the guy that glued them together, if he's hit by a truck tomorrow, you are in deep trouble. The same goes with sustainability. Do I really need to do what I'm doing right now?
Yeah, and I think just like when we had similar talks around accessibility years ago, right? And I think that a lot of the points are the same, that you should really do this. It makes a lot of sense. And if you do it from the beginning, it doesn't overcomplicate your project. No. But retrofitting all of these, composability is a pain. Retrofitting, sustainability is also a pain. But doing it, being mindful when you think about your architecture, when you think about your setup, that's when you should consider all of these things. Yeah. So you don't, give yourself a ton of extra work later.
Yeah, and it is actually understanding how data flows and in what kind of levels it does. Yes. So it makes, I think that was a good digestion, right, Jonas?
Yeah, very much. Even I understood it, so that's perfect. That's perfect. Yeah, I guess that's it. Thanks a lot for your time, Toga and Philip, and thank you for all of you that has listened in. We'll send you the recording afterwards if there's something that you would like to hear again, and otherwise you're more than welcome to reach out to us at Umbraco or Enterspeed in relation to these topics, and obviously also our products if you have any questions in relation to those. Thank you. Bye bye.